to here on a Monday afternoon, getting back into some off-season coverage, off-season leftovers, along with a Summer League recap. I think this is the first episode we've done here since Summer League ended. We are back in our humble abodes. Sean Highkin out there in Portland joining us once again here on Dome Theory. Appreciate you being here, Sean. We're going to talk about his new newsletter that's out as well, the Rose Garden Report. Love the name, Sean. One day, if we get a Celtics Blazers finals, we'll have a Garden Report crossover event here in
I
CLNS, I'd assume. But
I used to back in the day. I used to go. First of all, that was totally not intentional. I named it that
no,
after.
I love it. There's
No,
room
but it's
for a
because
few Garden Reports.
well, but also because the Blazers arena, before it ever had a corporate sponsor, it used to be called the Rose Garden, and that was one of the best names for an arena that there was. And so when I was naming this thing, I wanted to put that in there somewhere. And I actually used to go on the Garden Report back in the day.
Yep.
Back when I was covering the Bulls in 2017, when they played the Celtics in the first round, that was when Jared Weiss was still doing the Garden Report. And so I have vivid memories of the two of us hours after the games ended, either at the TD Garden or the United Center, because we were both traveling at that point. We would go out onto the court like as they were taking the court down and tape those Garden Reports. So I actually do have a history with the Garden Report as well.
Like 17 Rondo, Celtics Bulls era.
Yep.
that
yep.
was
The three
quite
alphas.
a time.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is probably the same mic. Not much has changed here on the Garden Report, but we're on Dome Theory today. Appreciate you being here, Sean. You are a mainstay out there at Summer League in Vegas. I see you putting in work and talking to everybody out there as we're used to. And this was my second summer out there, the first real summer. I know you were not a fan of the setup last year out there, and it was a little more normal this year. Just talk about the experience this year, getting back to normal out there. Blazers winning the championship, getting their rings, so that had to be quite a ride to follow. Just what were some of your big takeaways from Summer League just in your time out there?
Well, Bobby, I'm glad you got to experience this Summer League, because I remember the first time you and I actually met in person was out at Summer League last year. And last year, it was good to have the event back because they didn't have it at all in 2020, obviously because of COVID. But last year, it was we were all physically out there in Vegas watching these games, but it was not the same. There was just not the amount of interaction that you could usually have. And usually it's so easy to just wander around and talk to whoever you see. But last year, there were just so many restrictions, understandably so, because that was right when the Delta surge was going on. So I understand why they wanted to keep everything kind of regimented and keep everything restricted. But there were so many different rules about where we could or couldn't go or who we could talk to. This year, for better or worse, however you want to land on, where the country's COVID response is at this point, things were totally back to normal. This felt like a summer league from 2018 or 2019. It was totally back to, we could go wherever. The thing that I'm really glad we got back was the pit, which is down in Thomas and Mack, kind of behind the media seats, but in front of the tunnel where you go back to do the media availability. That used to be the move, is to just post up down there and then just talk to whoever filters through, because that's where all the agents would go through. That's where the team personnel from the teams that were about to play the next game there would filter through, the media people. So that used to just be the place to go and talk to whoever and just sit there and talk to whoever came through over the course of a day. That was completely gone last year because they would only let people down there who needed to be down there. But that was back this year, so I was really happy to see that.
Do you like Summer League basketball? I quietly enjoy the chaos of it. They got this awesome double overtime rule, and a couple games went the Kings Magic, Hornets Lakers late into the night when there was 15 people left in the stands. There was a fight during that game. Some guy in a Melo jersey started punching someone out. I'm sure you saw the video. I actually was a couple sections over from it when it happened. I didn't see it, but it was crazy. And then there was a Celtics Bucks game that was pretty wild as well. Went down to the wire. They changed the score twice in the fourth quarter. I think it came down to the final basket. Matt Ryan hitting a three and getting injured on it. There were some good games. There's some terrible games too. You're not even paying attention to while you're sitting there and doing work or talking to people. But there's some sneaky good basketball there, I guess is the way to describe it.
You got to pick your spots with it. You can't go into these games expecting them to be good games, but what you can do is you can watch. I'm not even necessarily just like certain, you want to, there are certain prospects obviously that everybody wants to see, but you can't even like look at it and say, oh, they put up these numbers, so they must have been good, because there are so many guys who put up huge numbers at Summer League, and you can tell that they're just, putting up these numbers against scrubs, and it's not really like, I'll never forget my first ever Summer League that I covered. I've been doing this for 10 years now. My first Summer League was 2012. There were 2 co-MVPs of Summer League that year. One of them was Damian Lillard, who even back then you could just tell from like how mature he was and the way he was playing that you could tell that he was going to be a star. So that was one end of the spectrum. Do you know who his co-MVP was? Josh Selby.
I'm trying to pull up the names of past Summer League MVPs here as you speak.
Josh Selby was his co-MVP, and that was just a guy who just put up huge numbers. He was like dropping 30 in all these Summer League games, and then he never really did anything in the league. So you have to be careful when it comes to extrapolating too much, good or bad. I'll say this though: if somebody is playing their second or third year at Summer League and they're still struggling, that's a concern. But it's not necessarily a sign that somebody's going to be good if they're going off at Summer League. But I will say though, the vibe I got, I tried to see at least one game of all of the big, the top 7, top 8 guys in the draft this year. Paolo Banchero, Chet Holmgren, Jabari Smith, Keegan Murray, Jaden Ivey, Benedict Mathurin. Like, I try to watch at least all those, those guys. All of them at different points looked pretty good, but it's also just like, you have this access. You get to talk to different scouts, different team execs, coaches, whoever from different teams, and just kind of get an idea of what people think about these guys. One thing that I've kind of enjoyed about this year is it does not feel like out of the top 10 guys or whatever. Let's say top 10, top 8, whatever the case may be. Out of those top guys, usually there's at least one guy in that group where you talk to different team personnel and they say, I have no idea what this team was thinking taking this guy that high. This guy isn't very good. He's going to be a bust. I feel like there's really not a lot of that going on, at least at the top of this draft. Everybody, team personnel from people from all the teams that had their picks that high, everybody is pretty happy with who they picked. Scouts that you talk to think all these top guys are going to be pretty good. The pick out of that group that was the most criticized on draft night was Keegan Murray with Sacramento, just because Jaden Ivey was a lot more of the consensus. This is who it should go number 4. And people were kind of, and also just because it's the Kings, people were just like, oh,
I nearly fell out of my chair.
The guy. Right. But he won MVP of Summer League, and he looked like he's going to, maybe Jaden Ivey is going to have a better career than him in the long run. We aren't going to know that for 10 or 15 years. But Keegan Murray looks good. You can't make us, look at just based on what he did at Summer League and just some of the stuff that we feel like is going to translate, just, the maturity that he has with the way that he plays. That's what you look for with these kind of younger guys is, regardless of the numbers that they put up, does it look like they're going to be able to help an NBA team right away? And you can't look at even that pick that was controversial on draft night. It seems pretty reasonable to say that the Kings didn't make a mistake making that pick, even if you were higher on one guy than the other.
No, it's almost like a prerequisite. Like, you have to go out and play well. If you play amazing, it's like, all right, that's step 1. And if you play bad, it's like, uh-oh. But all the top guys did play well for the most part. More guys get hurt than ever, and I think it's more so if you get hurt in any way whatsoever, you're done the second that happens. So Shaedon Sharpe goes down. I don't think he did get knocked out for the summer, right? So he's going to be kind of on the sideline until
he had a small tear in the labrum in his shoulder. Which,
so he had a little bit more of an injury.
Yeah, he was hurt, and they were really, the whole organization, whether all the coaches, Damian Lillard, obviously he gave that interview with Cassidy Hubbard where he said he wants to see why Shaedon Sharpe was picked as high as he was, and also just general NBA viewers who hadn't seen Shaedon Sharpe play since high school because he didn't play at Kentucky. Everybody was
right? You can't make it up. He missed the season and the Summer League.
Right. From what I understand, I think it's probably going to be another week or at least a few more days before they give us a real update. I believe it was July 9th that that this injury happened, or that they put out this update about the injury, and they said he would be reevaluated in 10 to 14 days. So theoretically, later this week we could hear something about Shaden Sharp. It sounds like right now they're optimistic that it's a small enough tear in the shoulder that if he just rests it and does physical therapy, it'll heal on its own and he won't need surgery and he'll just be ready to go by training camp. But there's always a chance that it doesn't get better in the last couple of weeks and they do decide to do surgery. And in that case, he'll probably be out until like December or January, which would be a huge bummer for both for him and for the Blazers, who are really high on him as a front office and as an organization. But that was one of the big bummers for, as somebody who, like, since the Blazers are the team that I cover, that was the main thing that I was looking at, was what is Shaden Sharp going to look like at Summer League? And he gets injured after the first 5 minutes. I will say, though, Jabari Walker, their number 57 overall pick, he looks like he might be this year's every year there's one guy who's like taken in the second round. Like last year it was Herb Jones, where teams see him play and they're just like, how did this guy fall? It almost feels like Jabari Walker is going to be that guy this year.
JD Davison in the mix too.
Sure, yeah. There's always a couple of guys, and it seems like they might have gotten, you're seeing all those, like I've seen a few different, websites call him the biggest steal of the draft. And the Blazers liked him enough that they signed him to an actual NBA contract to get their final roster spot, as opposed to a two-way. They had a two-way spot open that we just kind of assumed, late second round pick, they're probably just going to give him a two-way. No, they saw enough from him over this week at Summer League that they actually signed him to a real NBA contract. So if you can get a guy with the 57th pick that you think is at least even going to become a rotation player, that's a huge win. So at least for the Blazers, they salvaged something out of that, as opposed to just, Shaden Sharp goes down and now it's totally pointless.
Well, you mentioned Josh Selby. I'm looking at the list here, and that actually is the only name that went by the wayside. I don't know what became of Josh Selby, but all these other names of Summer League MVPs, Randy Foye, Nate Robinson, Jared Bayless, who is decent.
Oh, yeah.
Blake Griffin, John Wall, Damian Lillard, the co-MVP that year, Jonas Valanciunas, Glenn Rice, Kyle Anderson, Tyus Jones, Lonzo Ball, Josh Hart, current Blazer, Brandon Clark, Cam Thomas, Davion Mitchell, two guys who have shown some stuff already early in their careers, and now Keegan Murray, who should be solid at least as a pro here.
The Kings have the back-to-back. The Kings have the back-to-back Summer League MVPs then, I guess, with
Kings should be mad they didn't get rings last year.
That's the thing. And actually, as soon as I've only ever covered one Summer League championship game in person. I was not in Vegas yesterday for that game. The only time I actually covered a Summer League championship game in person was 2016, because I went down for the first 4 or 5 days of Summer League like I usually do. And then, so this is when I was covering the Bulls still. And Jimmy Butler was on the Olympic team that year. That was the year they played in Rio. And the Team USA training camp, which is also in Vegas, started the same day as the last day of Summer League. So I flew back down there to go to USA camp. And so I covered I was at the last, the championship game for the Summer League. And the Bulls won it that year because Denzel Valentine hits a huge buzzer beater. Unfortunately, that was the high point of Denzel Valentine's NBA career, but
we know the low point.
Well, yeah, he has this incredible quote at the end where he is asked, how much are you actually celebrating this? Because Summer League it's just Summer League. And Denzel Valentine says, anybody who says Summer League championship doesn't matter has never won the Summer League championship, which is just one of the greatest quotes that I think I've ever seen in the years that I've been covering the league. And then I say all this to say that Bobby Portis was also on that team because he was going into his second year, that Bulls Summer League team. And the other day, when they first announced that they were going to do Summer League championship rings, Malika posted the picture on her Instagram of like the Summer League championship rings. And Bobby Portis commented on her Instagram post and was like, I still need my ring from 2016. And it's like the players are seeing it. And also, like, Bobby, you have an actual ring with the Bucks where you were actually an important role player. What are you doing still being mad about not getting a Summer League championship ring? But yeah, like, I saw some pictures of the Blazers Summer League championship rings. Jabari Walker, who we just talked about, said something in one of the post-game interviews about, like, I almost feel bad putting this ring on because it's too nice. It looks more like a trophy. But yeah, they're really doing it up now with the Summer League championship.
Well, it's easy to laugh at. I think everybody has fun with the performances and the guys who break out and the teams that do well and this and that. You play 5 games and you decide a championship. It's a little. I think it was like what 7 to 10 teams that were tied for the best record, and then they just went to margin of victory or whatever to throw the 2 teams in there. They air the championship game at 3:00. It's silly, but it's become an experience. I mean, everybody goes, every star's out there watching for almost the whole stretch. Everybody in the media world's there. You said you've been covering this for 10 years now, and
Yeah.
the crowd's packed wall to wall, both gyms. It's unreal what this has become, and it's Vegas, right? Everybody in the dead of the off season wants to go to Vegas for a full week. Wants to go to the clubs out there, wants to be in the casino. Like, it is just, there's an allure to it. I already can't wait to go next year. It is so much fun. It's such a great networking event. This thing, like the NBA, between what the league's become, like the stars, the NBA Twitter, everything, they've just stepped in shit left and right. And for this like rec showcase event for a couple weeks in July to become this main event each year, like one of the biggest events on the calendar for the league. It's crazy, especially for a guy like you who's been doing it 10 years, probably back to when it was a small event. It's kind of crazy what this has become.
Oh, yeah. And this wasn't even the craziest that it's been. Let the Lakers ever have a top 5 pick, and you'll
Oh
see
my
how
God.
crazy Summer League can act. Because Laker fan, I mean, I'm sure you saw this being out there. Laker fans always roll deep to Summer League anyway.
Yep.
Just
For Cole
because,
Swider this year. And a
well,
couple
but
other guys, Max Christie.
sure, yeah, but I mean, some of it is because of that, but also like LA is only a 4-hour drive from Vegas, so it's really easy
Yep.
to just like take a day trip and just go out there. So you're talking about Cole Swider, Max Christie. Last year, I think Austin Reeves was probably like the guy at their summer league. Imagine when the guy that everybody is watching from the Lakers summer league is number 2 overall pick D'Angelo Russell, number 2 overall pick Brandon Ingram, number 2, especially, I mean, the Lonzo one was like a whole different level because that came with its whole own circus, because that was like when LeVar was out like doing every interview and pushing the big baller brand stuff. The two craziest summer leagues that I've ever seen in terms of like the upper bowl of the Thomas and Mack Center being totally packed, and like you can't even get in without buying a scalp ticket from outside, which is crazy for summer league. The Lonzo game, which was 2017, his debut, and then also 2019 Zion Williamson's first game. That was like an unbelievable circus. And by the way, that game got called off early because there was an earthquake.
Yes, I remember that. There was also a Kawhi trade during that stretch as well, right?
That was
Or,
like, yes,
signing.
like an hour later, because I was not in the gym for the Lonzo game, or not for the Zion
For the
game.
earthquake. Yeah.
Yeah, I was in the media room when the earthquake happened, and everybody was just going crazy. And then I just, walked back to, I was staying within walking distance of the gym that time. So I finished whatever work I had to do, walked back to my hotel. On my way back to the hotel, I stopped at Capriotti's, the sandwich place that's in kind of that strip mall that's near the hotel I was staying at. Sat down with my sandwich. This was like 11 or 11:30 p.m. at that point. As I'm sitting down with my food, I get the Chris Haynes alert that Kawhi Leonard is going to the Clippers. And then 2 minutes later, I get the Woj alert that Paul George also got traded to the Clippers. So it's like, well, okay, I guess I'm not going to have, be able to go to bed early tonight. I had been planning on just like going to bed early and not, going out that night. But it's like, well, I guess I got it right now. So it's always fun to just kind of be in the city or in the building where whatever chaos is happening in the NBA world, because every GM, every agent, every coach is all at Summer League. So just being in the building for that, when something crazy like that goes down, it's a lot of fun. It's something I definitely look forward to every year.
Well, what's your focus? Because I'm sure it changes year to year, whether there's a big prospect or something on the team you're covering, or guys to watch. There are quite a few this year. You can go in and really cover your team wall to wall. You can watch all these games closely, and like you said, there's a lot of people to talk to as well. So you're trying to run around, and even just some of the stuff at night. Like I saw, you see stars in the casinos and stuff,
Uh-huh.
and like everybody's just like walking around everywhere. It's unreal what you have access to out there. I see Shams just like standing in Aria one night. I'm like, what's he doing? like, like it's unreal. So, what's your focus going into summer league each year? Like, what are you trying to accomplish each year when you're going into this?
Well, it depends on it depends on what my work situation is and what I'm doing. So let's just throw out last year, because last year we were just all feeling like, should we even be here right now because of the COVID stuff. So I'll give you two examples. The last two real summer leagues that I went to were 2019 and this year. So in 2019, I had a couple of big feature stories that I was working on for BR. One was about different guys who were kind of older veterans who were playing on summer league teams trying to get back in. And, Thomas Robinson was one of them. And then the other one was just talking about talking to different people who wear the ironic, old jerseys to summer league, which is another thing I like to do. So I go into that summer league with a couple of these story ideas that aren't necessarily tied to specific games. And so my time at summer league becomes, I need to get the people I need to get for these stories. And then beyond that, I'm just networking and trying to talk to people. So sometimes I'll approach it that way. This year, I just launched this new Blazers newsletter that I'm trying to build up. And so my focus now is, I'm going to, wherever the Blazers are, whenever they play, whenever they practice, whatever time I can get, with people in the organization. They have a relatively new front office group that I'm still kind of trying to get to know and build those relationships with. Whatever I can do for that became the priority for me this year. So it kind of changes year to year, depending on what I'm doing, kind of more in a greater, work sense.
So, what's it like covering a team through a newsletter? I know mine's moved in this direction, and quite a few people are covering
Uh-huh.
teams in the league this way now. You got the Rose Garden report out. You can follow it at Rose Garden REPRT on Twitter, and go get it at rosegardenreport.beehive.com. You can go subscribe over there.
Go
What
do it.
what made you go that direction, and what's it been like covering a team, and I guess having a smaller but more engaged audience, people who are willing to pay and have access directly to this kind of content?
It's been interesting, and this is something that I had been toying with the idea of doing for a while. And I think this was the time that just it made sense to do it, because this past season for the Blazers was so just going back really to about a year ago. They lose in the first round to Denver when they probably shouldn't have lost that series, because Denver, like most of their good players, were injured. And then they had the coaching search and the coaching hire, and bringing in Chauncey Billups and all of the stuff that kind of surrounded that, and the way that whole thing was handled. And then there was, does Damian Lillard want to leave? Like, that was a whole thing last summer. And then the season starts, the team starts off terribly. Neil Olshey gets fired, which is really, really, really what it is like you say, you say something happened, and then you say, and that was a whole thing. So it's like they had their coaching hire, and that was a whole thing. And then Dame was like flirting with maybe trying to ask out, and that was a whole thing. And then the general manager gets fired for, fostering a toxic workplace environment, and that was a whole thing. And then at the deadline, they completely strip the team down. They trade away CJ McCollum. They trade Robert Covington. They trade
One
Norm
of the
Powell.
greatest tanks of all time. They were in a
Oh,
playoff
yeah.
spot.
And
They were in a playoff position.
people didn't understand those trades at the time. They did exactly what they were trying to accomplish. Dame has his his ab surgery. And they basically treated it as like, because remember a couple of years ago, the season that got shut down because of COVID, the 2019-20 season, Steph Curry breaks his hand like 3 games into the season. And the Warriors basically just say, they had made the finals 5 years in a row at that point. They had, just lost Durant. They had just lost Klay Thompson for the season. They were like, you know what, Steph, don't even worry about coming back this year. Just take this entire year off. We're going to be bad for 1 year, and then we'll reload next offseason and try to be good next year. And that was kind of what Portland was, when they decided to shut Dame down in January. He probably could have come back. That's like a 6-week recovery from that injury. He probably could have come back if there was any reason for him to come back. But it's like, you come back to maybe make the play in and then get demolished by Phoenix or Golden State in the first round. And they probably needed to, get rid of, break up the Dame CJ thing anyway, which, the previous GM refused to do because he was just attached to the idea of never trading CJ. And so now once there's like new front office in there, it gave them an opportunity, I think, to reset some things. And so that's really what last trade deadline was trying to accomplish. Now it remains to be seen how successful that was and, whether they're more talented now than they were. But it was pretty obvious to everybody except for the former general manager that the group that they had before had just run its course and they needed to do something different. And so that's why they kind of pivoted to bringing in a lot of, whether it be Josh Hart or Jeremy Grant, who they just traded for from Detroit, or Gary Payton II, who they just signed as a free agent. Joe Cronin, their new general manager, refocused a lot of how they were building around Dame with bringing in a lot of more, defensive-minded players who could play different positions and trying to build around him that way. So you can land wherever you want to land on wherever you think this team is in the Western Conference hierarchy. I don't think they're close to, Golden State, Phoenix, Denver, Clippers, like that group of like the top teams in the West. I think they're more in that second or third group of teams that are going to be fighting for one of the last 2 playoff spots or a play-in spot. But they're doing something different now, which is something that I think you couldn't have said the last few years.
No, and it's got to be encouraging for the fans who've been able to retain Lillard in the way they have here. It's sort of one of 2 big successes of this plan that the league had for trying to keep stars like him and Bradley Beal in their markets long term by just showering them with money. And this extension he signed, $58 million the first year, $63 million the second year at age 36. You see why 2 guys who maybe didn't have straightforward paths to super teams or contending destination like Lillard and like Beal signed on for this, because if push comes to shove and it doesn't work, they can probably get out anyway. So it's got to be encouraging for the fans that they've been able to keep these guys, whether it's Lillard or whether it's Beal. But the path back to winning with a contract like that, bringing in some other guys who are now on their second or third deals, like Grant, like Nurkic re-signed a pretty, medium-sized value there. I don't know how they're going to do it. It's tough. Like you said, the West, pretty packed. Some other teams got better. I like what Sacramento did this offseason. You get a guy in Sharp who probably has a long learning curve ahead of him here, just given his age and his experience. Yeah, Grant. I love Grant, but is he a good enough second, third option here? Again, it's encouraging. You keep Lillard. You have this level of investment from him. He's probably going to be here the next few years at the very least. But what's next? Like, what is next for this team that was in such a great position for so many years? But now you got this massive contract, not much around him. Like, these Lillard and Beal situations are really so similar to me because they had so much star power around them for years. And then it's kind of those 2 guys individually, trying to figure it out around them.
Well, first of all, I think Portland has a significant amount more talent around Dame than the Wizards do around Bradley Beal. I don't think that there's really nothing you look at on that Wizards roster and think
Porzingis.
Yeah. When I think the thing that people, I'm with you. I don't know what the clear path is back to title contention. I say back like they were ever there. I know they made the conference finals 1 year. I don't think they ever, with Dame, have been a title contender. But I don't know if there's a clear path back there as much as this, switching it around and trying to build a roster that makes more sense around him than the roster that they had before around him.
Was
You
keeping them their only choice? They
What do you
just
mean?
have to keep did extending him on this deal, keeping him in Portland. Was that their only choice? Like,
I mean, I
would it have
suppose
made
you
sense to
always
move him?
could. I mean, that's a thing people have said, and just from a pure, like, objective, like, pure calculated, like, cap management standpoint, like, I get where that's coming from, but I don't know, man. Like, if you're a market like Portland that doesn't really, free agents aren't, like, lining up to get there, and you have a guy who's been there his whole career and is a multi-time, all-star, all NBA guy, whether, wherever you want to land on whether he should have been or not, was named to the NBA's like top 75 all-time list. You can maybe argue about whether he should have been or somebody else should have been, but he was on that. Like, he's that level of dude in the league in terms of his status and stuff. And he wants to be there.
Yep.
Like, the idea of just, well, the cap number is going to look bad in a couple of years, so we should just trade him now and then get a bunch of draft picks, and maybe one of them will end up being as good as Damian Lillard one day. Like, I just, that's never, like, to me, that's the most boring way to be a fan of sports. Like, is to just be doing it from the point of a GM or like the point of view of a GM if you're a fan, and worrying about the salary cap number. And it's like, you got this dude who's probably maybe the best player in franchise history. He wants to play there his whole career. They feel like the teams that they build around him can still be, at least pretty good and be in the playoffs. Like, you're going to just trade that for several years of being bad and hope that you get lottery luck, which you may get lottery luck, or you may be Sacramento or Orlando and just like kind of build your way back into no man's like I get it, but like, I don't know.
I like it. I like it. You keep yourself interested. I mean, they already had the tiniest little bit of KD buzz via Damian Lillard Photoshop.
He
I
did
don't know.
Yes, he posted that Photoshop. Yeah, that
But
was
that's
a
something
fun day of news cycle.
I guess Paulo did it too, but again, it felt a little bit more real when Lillard did it. Like, maybe you could
Well,
get in the race here at one point.
they
But
literally cannot now.
Yeah.
All of their contracts that are big enough for them to send out are restricted because they're guys that they signed or extended recently, and they're also hard caps. So legally, they literally cannot do a Kevin Durant trade right now. And even if they could, I don't think they really have anything that Brooklyn would be interested in. I mean, it was a fun day when Dame posted that Photoshop, but that's not
Well, the opposite, I guess, is Utah, right? A star who, for all intents and purposes, doesn't want to be there. They're stripping this thing down completely. Draft pick city. It's like Oklahoma City too, about to be going on in Utah, and that there's ways I guess you can talk yourself into it if you're a Jazz fan after all these years where they've been borderline contenders and had good postseason runs and have been a constant in the West standings out there near the top. And all of a sudden you're just going to the bottom. And again, as you said, waiting year in, year out, even if you do it successfully, like Oklahoma City has done here, they just want to keep doing it year in and year out until I don't know what the next step is toward winning for them. I don't love that. Philadelphia, Oklahoma, what Utah is about to do here. I guess if you're a place where players don't want to be, it's gone decently well for the Thunder so far, but it's so long. It's so grueling. The seasons you have to go through have to be so tough to watch. If you're someone who really likes watching the prospects come up, I guess it's fun, but this has to be better for Blazers fans than it's about to be for Jazz fans, I would think. Unless they just like hit a home run very early in this process and get Wembanyama and it just shoots through the roof.
Well, this Victor kid from France, who you just mentioned, every scouting report I've read of him has been like a cross between Giannis and Kevin Durant. So if this guy really is
like a perk comparison,
if that guy, no, I've seen like actual like draft analysts that I respect say stuff like that about him, and like Mike Schmitz, who's now in the Blazers front office, but was a draft analyst at ESPN for a number of years, said that he is the best draft prospect that he's ever evaluated in 15 years. Like people who like actually know what they're talking about, which I don't pretend to as far as draft stuff because I don't really watch any college basketball, so I'm not really the draft guy. But people whose opinions I respect on this stuff are saying that he is like the best prospect basically since LeBron. So if the Jazz get him, and there's going to be a race to the bottom, like you're going to have Indy in the mix, you're going to have San Antonio now that they traded DeJounte Murray. They're going to be going after Victor. So if Utah gets him, then suddenly that completely changes their timeline. But yeah, like the Utah situation is interesting because it was so clear that the Gobert Mitchell thing, like they won a lot of games. Like they were the 1 seed a couple of years ago, and then they lost in the second round. And then this year they lost in the first round to a Dallas team that didn't have Luka for the first half of that series. So like clearly that, and then you saw Quinn Snyder just walk away without another job lined up. So like when they were trying to, they didn't fire him. They were trying to keep him. They were trying to get him to sign an extension. And he was like, yeah, I'm good. I don't really want to do this anymore. So clearly the Donovan Rudy thing had run its course. And I think they figured they could get more for Gobert, so they traded him. And then it was also just clear that Donovan, as much as like they tried to put out that messaging early on that Donovan, they were still trying to build around him. CAA has been trying to soft launch the Donovan Mitchell trade request for a while. Like you've just known that was coming for, several months, if not a year. Like I remember going back to the All-Star break, there were a couple of interviews that he gave out, at the All-Star game where people were just like, yeah, I don't know about this. So it made sense from their standpoint to just completely start over, especially right now with there being a prospect like Victor, who people say is going to be like the next, game-changing once-in-a-generation guy. Sure, you might as well go for that. Or if you're San Antonio, you can get a bunch of picks for DeJounte Murray. You might as well just take this opportunity to just sort of tear it down. If you're Portland, Dame doesn't want to be traded. And it's not like it's such a weird look when you have a guy that you're like, so like look at what the Clippers did with Blake Griffin. And like maybe they cut bait on him at the right time because he was having all those injury problems. But remember when they signed Blake Griffin to all of, that big extension, and they talked about like he's going to be a Clipper for life, and he's going to be the best player in franchise history.
They had
and
a
then
ceremony.
And then 3 months later, they trade him to Detroit, and which he didn't want to be traded. He didn't ask to be traded there. They just did it. I get it if it's like Toronto and it's DeMar DeRozan and you have the opportunity to go after Kawhi Leonard and win a title. If you have an opportunity, if you have like a championship-ready supporting cast and you have the opportunity to trade Dame for Giannis, basically, it's like that's what Toronto did with the Kawhi thing. That's a little bit of a different situation. But for for a team like Portland where, you have a guy who wants to be there, doesn't want to leave, you have a good enough cast around him that you can at least feel like we can be a playoff team and maybe we catch some breaks and make a run one year. Like, it doesn't really make sense to just cut bait on it just because, like, his contract might not look great in a couple of years. Like, especially because, like, I remember, like, right after Neil Olshey got fired and there were a lot of analysts at certain networks who were very, have historically been very sympathetic to his interests, who were trying to like engineer these Damian Lillard trades. And the trades they were coming up with were terrible. They were like, they were like, a team's like not even like any of like their good. They were talking about like from like the Celtics standpoint. I think one of those.
I was just gonna say it. It was like Pritchard, Grant.
Yeah, it was like if that's what you're gonna get back for somebody like Damian Lillard, like at that point you might as well just give him the Kobe contract and let him play out the rest of his career if that's what he wants.
Well, I find it weird to wrap this up real quick here because I want to get to some other stuff too. The packages that are being talked about for Mitchell, especially from the Knicks here, and I guess sort of the new wave of these star deals for teams that are trying to bottom out. We saw it with the Spurs bringing back Gallinari. I guess the Knicks in a or the Jazz rather in a hypothetical package where we bringing back like Grimes and McBride and some of the young guys on the Knicks roster there. No ask for Barrett, who's up for a contract here. Randall, the bigger contract on the team. It's all about the picks. And the prerequisite for these deals now, and I guess this is sort of where Portland would have gone to, I'd imagine, if they were going to trade Dame, is, all right, who's got 10 future picks here, including 3 from other teams and 3 pick swaps? And you can't do a deal without it now. I was looking back at some of these trades, and Zach Lowe did it as well for ESPN last week. it's just going higher and higher and higher. And he said, the league was even thinking about putting a like new Stepien rule in where you can't do the swaps. And it's insane. Like you go into the negotiating table right now in these star deals, the Durant deal being the latest, as you'd imagine, where it's like, all right, the most you can trade is 7, and we're going to try to find some other picks here via other teams. This is how the Harden deal went with JaVale McGee, where the Rockets didn't even want, or not McGee, Jared Allen, where they didn't even want Allen, and they're just trying to reroute another pick to themselves. It's all about these picks and just stacking up these picks, and it's a little absurd. I get why it's good thing for the teams that are bringing these picks in, because you just get so many shots at it. But you're not even bringing back a centerpiece for your team in these deals a lot of the time. Like, I can't even imagine the Jazz doing this deal with the Knicks without bringing back a guy like Barrett. You're just going to bring back years and years and years of these picks from the Knicks, and it makes the drafts a little silly. You saw the Thunder had 4 firsts in this first round, and
there's gonna be a year where it's like just the Thunder, the Spurs, and the Jazz are gonna be like picking 2/3 of all the picks in the first round. Like, that's kind of what we're heading for. I understand sort of why Utah isn't interested in RJ Barrett, because they're going to have to pay him. And it's like, if you're tearing it down and starting a rebuild, what are you doing paying RJ Barrett like close to max money for that? So I get that. And from the standpoint of the teams that are giving up all the picks, I get, like, if you think that it's, trading for somebody and giving up all these picks is really going to put you in that next tier, I get it. I liked, and this was kind of an unpopular opinion at the time the trade happened, I was not mad at Minnesota giving up all those picks for Rudy Gobert, because they feel like they made the playoffs. They have, a future superstar that they feel like in Anthony Edwards. They have Cat, who's still in his prime. On paper, Gobert and Cat like cover up each other's weaknesses perfectly in terms of what that fit is going to look like. You might as well just say screw it and go for it, instead of trying to slow play it and then be worried that, like, in 3 years, Anthony Edwards is going to wonder if you're doing enough to build around him. Like, I liked going for that. I didn't so much like the Hawks giving up all those picks for DeJounte Murray, where I still don't even think they're a top 6 team in the East. I definitely don't like the Knicks, thinking that trading for Donovan Mitchell and having your whole team be Donovan Mitchell, Jalen Brunson, and Julius Randle. Like, that's still probably a play-in team at best. But they're still going to give up all these picks for him because they're just desperate to get any kind of star or anybody who's going to sell tickets there. So it's an interesting place that I think a lot of these teams are in.
Well, it's the prerequisite. I don't have any problem with teams giving up picks. In fact, I've always been a proponent of the Celtics giving up a bunch of picks for guys, and they've sort of done it on like a 1 year. They've actually timed it pretty well, where they've given up 3 consecutive first-round picks for guys just by doing it in the new league year there, instead of years and years and years. They did give up a swap down the line, but even a deal like Atlanta there, you're giving up 2 swaps, 1 other team's first, and then 1 of your own. So even though the total of picks going out end up looking crazy at the end of the day, it's never really as bad as it looks, especially for the good team that's given up the swaps that probably in the short term aren't even going to end up swapping. So it ends up looking crazy on paper. I guess just the thing for me is the amount as a prerequisite for even getting to the table, and these deals have just gotten kind of out of control. It almost takes you out of wanting to do deals like these, and I wonder what kind of impact that's had on Kevin Durant. That does lead us right to Durant, Irving, what's going on with the Nets there, Lakers connection a little bit out west, where it seems like, and this was one of the hot topics at Summer League, with the Kyrie to LA path, his future, how that's connected to Durant. And what I'm kind of stuck on here is the picks. It looks like the Lakers are kind of caught up on the idea of giving up 2 future first-round picks, which is really all they have at their disposal here after the Anthony Davis deal, for a Kyrie trade. And I'm looking at it, and it's got to be more than this, right? And maybe it's not. Maybe they just don't want to do this deal, or they're worried about LeBron leaving in a year and giving up even more future assets when he could just be ending this window here next summer. But are they really looking at the prospect of not only offloading Russell Westbrook here, which is something I feel like they need to do, especially given the report that came out from his agent dropping him off here, but bringing in Kyrie, who's still, for all intents and purposes, and there's a million reasons to be concerned about him, but a top 30 40, 50 player in this league on paper, whereas Westbrook's not even in the top 100 probably at this point. It seems like a no-brainer to me if you're trying to have like a last hurrah here as the Lakers after how horribly last year went to give up a couple picks and try to catch some old LeBron Kyrie magic, but they seem resistant to it, and I can't really lay my finger on why.
I think they're just trying to protect themselves against LeBron either, taking a steep decline, as he ages, because he's going into year 20, and LeBron is still great, but like we're at the
Did you
point
see
now
him in
where
the Drew League?
I did. We're at the point with LeBron, it's like, he used to be indestructible, and now you can probably count on him missing at least 15 or 20 games every year. And he also, like, he's still he has lost a step. It's to the point now where LeBron is a top 10 player in the league now and not a top 3 player in the league now, which is still incredible, but like I think they want to like protect themselves against like not having anything to go with after whenever this LeBron era is over. But to me, it's like the 2 first-round picks that they're talking about. One of them is you have to attach a pick to get off of Westbrook's money because you just like that's what it costs. It's so toxic that like I mean, like you mentioned earlier with his agent basically putting him on blast to Woj and talking about how he doesn't doesn't know that he needs to, to adjust the weight. Like his agent really like aired out a lot of that kind of stuff.
One of the more startling reports.
I know that was crazy. Like I can't remember the last time I've seen that, and it's not even like his agent Thad Foucher with Wasserman. That's like it's not like his agent is some like, low level, no name guy who hasn't had experience dealing with this stuff. That's an agent that has other very, high level clients. And like, so it's not even like that, and so for him to come out and say that, so it's like part of, one of the picks is to get off of Russ. The other pick is for the talent upgrade of Russ to Kyrie. Would I personally, if I was a general manager, want to be the one that rolls the dice on maybe this year Kyrie Irving is going to actually show up to work the entire season and not be any kind of a problem or any kind of a distraction? Would I want to be the team that does that? No, but also like the Lakers don't really, LeBron wants it. And you kind of, while LeBron is still under contract, you kind of have to do what LeBron wants, which, for better or worse, that's kind of how the Lakers have been operating. But also, the Lakers don't really have any other options. Nobody else is trying to trade for Russell Westbrook. If you're not gonna trade Russ for Kyrie, you're gonna trade it just as a salary dump and not really get a whole lot back.
There's gotta be something else going on here. Like the Nets don't want Westbrook back, or
I think the idea
it's just such a no-brainer deal to me.
I think the idea is that Brooklyn is trying to like figure out either if we get Russ, do we buy him out, or do we try to reroute him to a third team, or like what's the I don't think the Nets have any interest in getting Russ and keeping him. It would just be a matter. I think
that's the other thing in that report. Yeah, it seems like and I said this a couple months ago after how that season went in LA there. It doesn't matter if he's on the 47 million or minimum here, the way he season, and I think people are trying to recorrect it, and maybe they're right. Maybe people are being too hard on Russ because the sentiment against him has certainly gone to the extreme against him. But I think rightfully so. I mean, I said there's a chance he is not in the league next year, like Carmelo Anthony was before he joined Portland for about a day. Like that's the level of issues I think he caused out there with the Lakers, just in terms of how he fit in, how he approached his role, and especially fitting in next to a guy like LeBron. It is not good for him right now. And I think this agent report was just the latest evidence that it could go in that direction there. Whoever lands him is probably just going to waive him, stretch him, and then he might not find a new destination because bad teams want to play their young guys. Good teams saw that he's fit, and I know Kyrie has his concerns, but they almost look small compared to what Westbrook's bringing to the table to a team at this point, just given how he's approaching the game. I mean, no defensive effort, no shot, the crazy bank shot. I mean, like, I'm just reliving these Lakers spaces in my head from during the season. I know you were in a handful of them too. They were freaking out, and it was justified.
We're kind of getting into Allen Iverson in Memphis territory with with Westbrook. When
It's
somebody
sad.
who's it really is, because the thing about it is Russ is not a bad guy. Everybody, like, yes, like there have been, Russ has been like a jerk to media members. I personally try to like take that as much out of the equation of how I evaluate these guys as possible and be as objective with it as possible. And when you look at like Russ's like the charity work that he does, and you look at like everybody in Oklahoma City and other places have said that behind the scenes he treats team staffers very well. His teammates generally like him. Russ is not a bad guy, so you don't like to see some of this kind of stuff happen to somebody in that way. But there are two, when somebody is like a superstar and a lot of what they do is built on their explosiveness and their physical abilities and their athleticism. Once you lose that, it can go one of two ways. You can go the Vince Carter route where you reinvent yourself as a role player and you're able to stick around and, adjust to a new role and be willing to come off the bench and just kind of be a, spot up shooter. And you can stick around and have a 22-year career like Vince Carter did after he wasn't like a all NBA guy since, 2007 or 2008 or whatever it was. He stuck around for another 13 years after that. So you can go that way, or it can go the Allen Iverson way, where once you lose the athleticism, you're not willing to adjust to playing a different role. You're not willing to accept that you're not the same guy that you used to be, and then just all overnight. And I kind of think that, unfortunately, that's where Westbrook is right now, because he gets traded. He gets traded to Houston. After 1 year, they can't wait to get rid of him. He gets traded to Washington. After 1 year, they can't. It just keeps going, and this is going back to the stuff that we were talking about with Damian Lillard and why he isn't necessarily looking around at like, hey, this team isn't going to be a championship team. Maybe I should try to get somewhere else. With a lot of these guys, whether it's, Russ or Dwight Howard back when he left Orlando, once you leave your original team where they love you there and they're going to cut you a lot more slack for this kind of stuff, once you leave your original team, if it doesn't work out at the next place that you go, they're just going to kick you to the curb and you're going to become somebody else's problem. And you kind of give up a lot of the control over your situation and over how people perceive you.
What do you think becomes of the Nets here? It's so hard to predict. We still don't really know why Kevin Durant demanded the trade, and Kyrie.
I
It
think
looks
it's
like
because they wouldn't take care of his guy. I think that's kind of the
so. You
idea.
think he? So, is there a world where Kyrie, Durant take the four together? Because if they're together and Durant's trying to have his back and this and that, do they take the four in spite of ownership and the executives there and this big year? Or is this going to get ugly like the Simmons situation, you think?
I don't think either of them are going to be on the Nets on opening night. But if you asked me if you told me that one of the two is going to be there opening night, which one do I think it's going to be? I think it's going to be Durant. I think you can't bring Kyrie back after the way all this stuff. It's kind of the similar situation with the Lakers, which, as much as like you can say, well, there's no trade that's like the right value or whatever, they can't bring Westbrook back. The Nets can't bring Kyrie back. With Durant, it's a little bit more interesting because he's under contract for a few more years. And also
4 years.
Yeah. I don't, just based on what we know about Durant, I think Durant likes playing basketball too much to be in this mindset where he's going to do what Ben Simmons did in Philadelphia or do what James Harden did in Houston, where he's going to say, if you don't trade me, I'm not going to show up to camp. I don't see Kevin Durant doing that. I think they're going to trade him before camp just because they don't want to deal with it being a distraction. But I don't think he's going to do the thing where he makes it into a thing where, he's not going to show up or he's not going to go and do his job and be a professional. I don't see Kevin Durant doing that.
Isn't it amazing how there's no deal seemingly now? Especially after this Ayton situation. We can kick around that 10 the show if we want to, but there's really no path to him landing anywhere. I mean, Miami's shopping this hero, Robinson.
Which is not a very good offer.
It's like the Lakers. It's like the non-THT picks offer that the Lakers.
Well, what it does is, what I think all of this does is like just the fact that he's trying to force a trade with 4 years left on his like there are the teams that aren't on, because his quote unquote list that we know of is only Miami and Phoenix, basically. And there's all this talk of like, oh, well, could New Orleans put together a good package? Could Toronto put together a good package? Like, there's all these other teams that you can, on paper, say, well, this is a good offer and he'd be a great fit here. But if you're those GMs, the Nets have catered to every single thing that he and Kyrie have wanted for the last 3 years that they've been there, and basically gone out of their way to make it so that those two guys run the franchise. And he's still asking out with 4 years left in his contract. If you're like Masai Ujiri or David Griffin or one of these other GMs, why are you going to offer all this stuff for a guy who hasn't said he wants to go there? And if he did, he's doing this with 4 years left on his contract. What's to stop him from doing this with 3 years left on his contract next year if he doesn't like it in wherever he ends up getting traded to? So I totally understand why there are teams that are, even though it's Kevin Durant, and Kevin Durant, when he's healthy, is still MVP level Kevin Durant, even at age 34. I totally get why teams are not just lining up to trade everything they have for him like they would if he was 28 or however old he was when he went to the Warriors.
He's still a 37-6 on 53%.
I know.
You see the run he had in 2021. Man, like all right, and I like what you just said there about the organizational control, because when I really started thinking about it, and I guess it's been 2 or 3 weeks at this point, when the demand hit, I said, boom, go get him, Boston. I love Brown to death. Probably my favorite Celtic on the team right now. Million different reasons to love his growth, his performance that he just had in the postseason, the partnership that him and Tatum have really worked on. I just think it made all the sense in the world if you could have packaged him and, I don't know, maybe Smart and a couple picks to upgrade to Durant with Tatum. Like, you're all of a sudden talking about, not, I know they're considered championship favorites right now in Vegas, but
I would do that.
You're like,
Boston.
boom. Yeah, you're like, it's like Kevin Garnett landing in Boston in 08. You're a team.
Just to be clear, with most teams, I would still do it. Like,
yeah,
I wouldn't trade. Like, there's like 6 guys in the league. I'm talking about like, John Morant, Anthony Edwards. It has to be like that level of like young up and coming guy that we know is going to be like a MVP candidate for the next, 15 years or whatever. Like Pelicans fans talking about not wanting to trade Brandon Ingram for Durant. I'm just like, what are we talking about here?
So Celtics fans, and again, I've seen like polls, I've seen our chat room. I'd say it's at least 80% no on moving Brown for Durant. And is that Durant disdain? Is that worry about his future? Is it the organizational thing you talk about? The third one, that organizational piece and the amount of control and whatever you're ceding to him, that went poorly with Kyrie in Boston in a way that I think still kind of hits home here. But I also think people have legitimately fallen in love with Brown, maybe for good reason. He's been an amazing prospect. He's still young. He still has this upside.
And they made the finals with this group.
Yes.
Yeah, and they made the finals with this group, and they just got Malcolm Brogdon, who I think is going to be an upgrade for like why not run it back? But you know what team I think should be trying to get Durant? I don't know how they would do this. I don't think they have the picks that they would need to do, but the team that I think should be offering everything outside of Nikola Jokic to get Durant is Denver. If you put Durant and Jokic together, that team is winning a title.
That would be something. And man, they already look really good if Porter comes through. And I don't know what kind of asset Porter is right now, because that's the one, right? Maybe
right.
That would be
maybe it's Murray if he didn't have the back stuff, then Porter for KD would be like the obvious trade to make. But if I were Brooklyn, I'm not sure I would necessarily want like to take the gamble on is he ever going to be healthy? But like, that feels like the combination of like on paper you have enough talent to be able to get Durant, and you still have the 2-time MVP, and maybe they can keep Murray also. Like that team, like that team would be really good. That's the one that I look at that hasn't really been talked about much, but I also don't think they have the picks in order to make that happen, which it seems like that's kind of what Brooklyn would want. So I have no idea what's ultimately going to happen.
So do the Celtics? I was going to kick around 8, and I don't have much to add on that.
Whatever. Good for him. Get his money.
Yeah. And again, I think worthwhile for Phoenix to keep him. I couldn't believe.
Yeah, letting him walk for nothing would have been a disaster. You can always trade him down the line.
Yeah, and he's such a good player. I don't know how the sentiment against him went in the direction in the video game stuff, whatever. The Celtics weren't their standing as it is right now of championship favorites going into this year after the Brogdon move, after the Gallinari move. They still have a couple moves to make it looks like here on the back end of the roster, but you look at their core and it's pretty stacked 1 through 8, pretty versatile. I think someone said this to me, and it might have a case. This might be one of the most versatile rosters we've ever seen when you look at their pair of bigs and all the different wings they have, the 2, 4, 5 guys in Grant Gallinari. You got 3 guards who can really play in a variety of different spots. The defense, obviously, last year was historic. It's still so crazy to think this team that was dead men walking for a year and a half really looks like unbreakable right now when you think of the defensive system, when you think about their 2 scorers who are giving you 20, 25 each night, the coach who has really vaulted up the rankings in the league in just 1 year. It's kind of lunacy how this thing has flipped on its head in a year here. And here they are entering this year, championship favorites. You think that's warranted?
I don't know about champion. I think just out of respect to the Warriors, you kind of have to say the Warriors are still favorites. But I also, as far as making the finals out of the East, the Celtics just made the finals and they didn't get worse this offseason. You can argue with Brogdon and Gallinari, they got better. I still think that if the Bucks are fully healthy, they probably win that series and are probably the best team in the East. And
They made some good additions themselves.
And I think Giannis is still the best player in the league. Like, if I just had to have one guy to be the best player on my team, I would still go with Giannis over anybody else. So that would be the only team that I would put kind of in the same level as Boston. But yeah, I think they got better this offseason. I think they should be looked at least in the East, as the favorites going into next season. They're in a good spot because their main guys with Brown and Tatum and Smart are still young enough.
And Rob, let's throw Rob.
Too.
I mean, that guy damn near won Defensive Player of the Year in his first real year playing. I mean, what he did last year was mind-blowing. In many ways, I think he's the most exciting player on this team to watch night in and night out.
They've done well, and like, they didn't give up. Like, I don't know how effective Brogdon is going to be in the playoffs, but I think the idea with him and Gallinari is you just need regular season innings eaters and good rotation players that you can put out there for a lot of minutes if you want to, give Brown and Tatum a breather in the playoffs, or you want to just have a different look than Smart running the offense, and so you throw Brogdon out there. But for what they gave up for Brogdon, I think it's which is not very much. You give up like a late first and then a couple of your guys that like weren't even in the rotation. I think they got better, or at least they didn't get worse. So I think they're in as good a position as anybody to come out of the East again.
Yeah, and I don't know if he's gotten I think the Celtics fans have given him his due credit. They're putting the crown on his head every day. But man, Brad Stevens, huh? I mean, it's just been one great move after another. You see these summer league team even put together here that ended up being one of the better ones out there with a 2nd-round pick, a couple undrafted guys, some cast-offs from other teams. They were incredibly competitive and fun. He just seems to be pushing all the right buttons. I don't know how he's doing it. He's got a good staff around him of Ainge leftovers and guys who have been part of the organization for a long time. He has some relationships, but man, I mean, like Tyson, Neesmith for Brogdon, and the Horford trade going the way it did, and
hiring Ime Udoka, I think, is the biggest one.
I mean, come on, it's just been talk about stepping in shit. He's just been making one good move after another.
I would caution you though, and I get it. Like, I mean, clearly they needed a new voice. Like, clearly the Ainge thing had kind of run its course, and also Brad as a coach, I think he had felt like he was kind of burned out, and guys were sort of tuning him out, and so he wanted to go do something else, and so he moved into the front office. I would just caution you from getting too into like overpraising a front office executive, because it's always going to turn. You saw it with Ainge for a while. Like, there were, Celtics fans felt like Ainge could do no wrong and he's going to win every single trade. And like, he's the best. Like, it's always going to turn at some point. Like, it's going to turn for the Raptors at some point. Like, you see the way their fans talk about Masai right now, and a lot of that is warranted. It's going to turn at some point.
Well,
So
it's 2 years from now.
no, I
Jaylen
know.
Brown, free agency. Like,
Yeah,
what's
and if
gonna
he
the conversation's starting now. It's like,
right,
does he
and if he were to leave, I have no idea whether he is or isn't. I hope he doesn't because I generally like it when these guys stay where they are. But if he leaves and then they miss on a draft pick, suddenly we're not talking about Brad Stevens being a genius anymore. I would just caution you to not tie too much of the fandom up in like giving this much credit to a front office executive
well,
as
yeah,
good of a job as he's done.
even the Derek White trade, there's that 28 pick floating around out there. Maybe
Yeah.
things go sideways that year, and I guess it's what, number 1 protected. But the Spurs could get something out of that, and the White trade didn't exactly. It was solid. I think you
That
go
was a
back
good
and do
move.
it again, but
He was good for them
yeah. Yeah, he was good. He
in the
had his ups
playoffs.
and downs, but, more often than not, he was good for them. An upgrade on what they gave out in Romeo Langford.
Honestly,
Although
just
some
getting
people
rid
do
of
like Josh Richardson.
just getting rid of Enes Kanter and Dennis Schroeder just improved the vibe so much.
Oh, man. Who would have thought this podcast ends with Enes Kanter name drop? Man. Ooh, we could do an episode on that.
Yeah,
But
there's a lot going on with that.
there really is. Best of luck to Ennis in his new endeavors out there. Sean Highkin, love his coverage. Go get the Rose Garden Report. All of his coverage now via newsletter, podcast, written work, reporting, all the rest out there at the Rose Garden Report. And great to have you back here on Dome Theory. Always good talking to you. Always good following your Blazers coverage out there in Portland, as well as any summer league leftovers. Any pieces out, any reporting out that the people want to go get out there fresh at Rose Garden Report right now?
Well, the biggest thing I wrote recently, and we probably shouldn't get into this because it's probably like another 20-minute discussion, but I broke down a lot of the context around a lot of the rumors about the future of the Blazers ownership situation, where Phil Knight made an offer. Jody Allen, who has been running Paul Allen's estate since he passed away, says the team is not for sale. I believe that the team is going to be sold within the next year. So I wrote a big, if you want to read more about it, I wrote a big long thing going into all the different contexts and all the different, things the different dynamics that are at play with the ownership situation. So that's kind of the biggest thing that I have out recently. And then I have some stuff coming up that I'm still kind of trying to nail down, different people I want to talk to. And then also get the podcast, which is also called the Rose Garden Report. You don't have to subscribe to the newsletter for that. That's just free on Apple, Spotify, all the usual platforms. But go subscribe, rosegardenreport.beehiiv.com. Free or paid subscription. There's some stuff you get with the free subscription. You get a lot more stuff with the paid subscription. So I would encourage those of you who are interested to do that. But that's kind of what I got going on right now.
Yes, that's what's up. He's one of the best out there. Sean Highkin, of course. Boston Garden Report listeners, go help out our show. And go get Athletic Greens. This is a good one. Athletic Greens, greenfortheceltics.com/garden. They're giving you a 1-year supply of vitamin D, 5 travel packs with your first purchase over there. And people are buzzing about this stuff. All your daily nutrients and probiotics, everything in one little scoop. You put in your water, you start your day. They got the cool bottles you can carry it around with, and it tastes pretty great. Me, my mom, my uncle have been using it. athleticgreens.com/garden. Again, they're throwing in 1 year of vitamin D when you go and just buy something over there. It's kind of incredible, this offer they got going on right now. 5 travel packs too. Their gear's really cool. I'll show off some of them on Wednesday. We're doing a Garden Report Wednesday night. So tune in for that here on CLNS Media and Celtics All Access. John, once again, appreciate your time here on a Monday. And we'll talk to you soon, sometime next season.
Yeah, good.